with the international trade and law and investment law in Africa from the University of Pretoria. I'm sure you remember or you appreciate the late Professor Michel Usanguli, who unfortunately passed 2 years ago. He was one of the foremost African human rights activists, originally from Malawi, but was in South Africa, and also a scholar foremost in regionalism in Africa. And when I experienced his thoughts and his lectures on regionalism and integration in Africa, two things happened. I took interest in African integration, and again, I also had a different perspective on integration and my understanding of integration and how it had informed my subsequent research and work up to now. So Professor Michel had great impact. And I remember when I was in Pretoria in 2019, I was a course rep for the class, and they used to nickname me Integration. I have all students from all over Africa because this course was specifically for Africans, so it is called International Trade in Trade and Investment in Africa. Now, this perspective and its impact on me has made me a bit, not a pessimist. People say I'm very pessimist when it comes to African integration. But for the practicality of African integration and the course or the workshop title for this, I think agrees with me somehow. But we cannot continue to deal with integration, African development on the platter of just legalistic, just by mere practice or mere fact that we want to practice or move Africa through the regionalism perspective. We must be very, very practical and pragmatic. So I may sound a bit controversial when I'm discussing integration. It's on this note that the two topics given to me, I decided that I will deal with the first topic, second topic, and that would either inform me to deal with the second topic, or after my first topic, we would understand or we come to agreement that we already know what we know. So we should end. Because the first, Professor or Judge Yusuf Ahmed and my sister, Dr. Vera, so far have almost exhausted the preliminary issues, understanding of AfCFTA, unless we want to go a bit academic. And so I want to begin this lecture with 3 sets of questions. And these questions would perhaps help me to discuss my topic with us, or we had a discussion of my topic. Now, if you listen to these eminent scholars and jurists this morning and afternoon, so I just drew these questions from their presentations. Just a recent question I just drew from their presentations, from what we've heard, and from our own understanding and practice from various jurisdictions. Now, the first question is, if Africa already has multiple regs, and I would deal with them, the 8 of them, where they started and where they are now. Already Professor or Judge Yusuf has elaborated, expatiated extensively on those regs. Now, if we have all these, why has the African Continental Free Trade Area become necessary? That's the first question. So the second question, which I'll give you time to reflect and if you have answers. 2, that this multiplicity of regional economic communities signal any success, failure, or unfinished business in African integration, or on the heels of these and the coming into effect or operation of the AfCFTA, does it signal that Africa has failed? Or we just have unfinished business? And when are we going to finish those business? Are we going to continue the discussions and the forums and the seminars like this all our lives? Like Professor Yusuf, I'm familiar with the professor than the judge, said, the 2060 agenda, are we going to see in our lifetime, or our great-grandchildren are coming to also discuss the same way we are sitting here? So I'm sure that this discussion started years ago. And the third question, which I drew from Judge Yusuf's presentation and his statement, which was very striking to me when I sat and listened to him, and he said, quote, Africa is going the wrong way in integration. And just something I just took from him, so I have to, as an academic, I have to cite him properly. If you're academic, everything you cite, don't think that it's because you took it from somebody's statement, you can just cite it and use it. No, you can't do that. So I just have to reference him properly. Now, so is Africa going the wrong way in integration? Sorry, it's a statement. Africa is going the wrong way in integration. And my question, do you agree? And I'm sure you're not going to agree because he's here or because he's a boss here. You know, you may, by your experience and your interactions, have enormous evidence to support that you disagree with him, especially those of you who have been in practice of and encountered the process of integration in Africa. So the question that I asked, or I put there, or the subtitle I put there is, which type of integration is he talking about? We know, you understand that all integration starts from the political integration, and then we build onto economic integration. The AfCFTA, as we come to know from the theories I'm going to espouse, is that it's at the economic integration, which we are struggling with. For political integration, we all agree that even though we don't have, because there are numerous wars in Africa, you know, it's another topic that we can discuss later. But these are the questions I want us to reflect in the next few minutes. And if anybody has any view on any of them, you can share with us.
Okay. So I think I'd like to speak somewhat to the third question, the general open question of, are we going the wrong way in integration that everyone seems to probably want to avoid? And call back to a conversation I was having with a friend of mine before I left for here a couple of days ago. So there's been a statement by the heads of state of the East African community that they want, they have committed, sorry, not just one, they have committed to eliminate all non-tariff barriers by July 2026, which on paper makes complete strategic sense. We have had protocols in place for a decades plus to the same effect. But we were having that conversation, and then we realized there's a lot of pitfalls that people can't see. So if you look at it from one perspective, it might look like integration to me and to my friend that we were having the conversation with is going perfectly well in one direction. And then if you just look in between the cracks, you'll notice some things are missing. For example, this is to specifically the situation of Kenya, mutual recognition agreements. They're very key to the trade in services regime and liberalization across just that specific small corner of Africa, just the East African region. So we've had mutual recognition agreements for architects, we've had mutual recognition agreements for accountants, we've had mutual agreement for nurses, and there was one drafted for lawyers sometime in 2016, 2017. It was drafted. I have it on my laptop here. It was tabled to the attorney generals of the partner states of the East African community, and then the law societies weighed in. They said, no, just no. They didn't refuse it. They just said, we require further deliberation. That was in 2016. It's in 2026. So people talk about elimination of non-tariff barriers. So how are you going to do that? How are you going to how are you going to negotiate? How are you going to negotiate everything else that happens as per policies, as per protocols, as per regulations, as per laws, if you can't even allow the lawyers to work cross-border? But no one wants to deal with that. They just want to get rid of the things that seem easy on the surface, like a roadblock from Tanzania into Kenya. And it seems to me, it might seem on the surface like integration is working, But if you look at the pillars that you would need for it to actually work, the actual institutional infrastructure, then possibly there's something I'm not seeing, but I don't think we're much further off from when we started.
Good. Okay. Somebody there.
Good afternoon. My take I'll try and answer question number 3. My take from the presentation this morning was about the gaps that are there in the current, in the ongoing protocol, I rather say, and also the lineage judge actually took us through in the genesis of what has been happening in Africa as early back as the formation of Pan-Africanism. So answering to this question, Africa is not going in the wrong direction, although there are gaps. I'm sure it is the purpose also of this workshop that as scholars we identify those gaps and we don't leave it there. We approach wherever need be and try and have the discussions and the discourse within our state parties as to the glaring gaps that are there. And with integration, we need it yesterday because one of the mandates of the AfCFTA is to actually ensure that there's accelerated industrialization, not for the sake, but for us to actually move away from this, let me just borrow this term, from the poisoned chalice that we have inherited, where there is a lot of extraction from Africa. And we're trying to reverse that. And in the process of reversing, I'm sure there are gaps as highlighted by the lineage judge. And so we now have to look at it through the legal eyes, through the economic eyes, and do what is working to actually strive to that goal of integration. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
I would like to take 2 bites on a cherry, if that's allowed, particularly on question 1 and number 3. So on the first one, from my experience of sitting with some members of what they call the DG INTPA, that's what they call in the European Union, Department General of International Partnership Agreements. What I noticed is this. The DG INTPA came up with what they called EPAs, Economic Partnership Agreements, which the EU used to weaken Africa. So they would come and negotiate with different countries or with different regional blocks. And in that way, they kept weakening African states. So in response to this, some of the people who were part of the AfCFTA architecture from the background and so forth thought of using the REX as building blocks. And then you come up with this AfCFTA so that you can respond to the EU. That's why even up to now, when we are doing advocacy and lobbying at the EU, it's difficult to say EU-AU partnership. No, because the EU does not fit in the framework of the AU. The AU does not trade as AU. So now, until then, what was happening is EU versus EAC, EU versus SADC. Because in Africa, we always traded as REX, not as a unity. Now, in response to that, that's why they thought of coming up with these REX, putting them together, and coming up with AfCFTA. However, which we are going to explain, I'm sure, these building blocks are uneven. You can't build a house like that. So I think Professor already mentioned, Judge Yusuf, why these blocks actually will fall on you if you leave it under that house. Because these are uneven and some of them are round, some of them are made out of mud, some of them are made out of concrete, you know, so then you can't fit in. So that's the reason why we are trying to come up with AfCFTA despite all these RECs which are not well-shaped. Yeah, just to be on point on that. Now, if I move on to number 3, Africa is going through, the wrong way in integration. Of course, it's evident, not only because His Excellency the Justice is here. I can give examples on this because this is my area of research for my PhD. Number 1, let's look at the East African community, EAC. If we look at regional integration, let's go as far as Immanuel Kant. Immanuel Kant, the peace doctrine. It is inconceivable in a regional integration to see partner states going to war. Congo and Rwanda, they are members of EAC, and they are actively at war. And no one is daring to point to stop the war, and they are just playing around to say, no, we need to talk. But the rules should have been very clear. That's what Justice Yusuf mentioned. Is it a free-for-all? There are no rules for admitting and rules for expelling. Come on. You see, so it's failing. There are so many points we can mention. How can you talk about regional integration when there's no free movement of people, but there is free movement of goods? You expect the goods to fly on their own without free movement of human beings? Just look at forced migration across East Africa. Most of the refugees whose human rights have been abrogated in East Africa are coming from East African community. Strictly speaking, these are not supposed to be called refugees. They are East African citizens. Look what the European Union treated Ukrainians, who are not even members of the EU. When the war broke out in Ukraine, immediately the EU opened up the borders to accommodate the Ukrainians. They are not members of the EU. Now, these people that you mistreat here in East African community, they come from East African member states. And you are telling me this is working? No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we'll take the session. Let me address. So from his perspective, that's the question again that as a teacher, I will still keep on asking that there's the multiplicity of agreements, the spaghetti bowl, signing protocols and agreeing to sit and talk signals any success or improvements. So we can ask that question, further question on that. And so you see that when we talk about integration and development, the answers that I get from Doctor is so philosophical, and we will come to that, from the perspective that she agrees that we are doing something because the indices or the metrics by which she's making judgments may be right. So she's confident in disagreeing and giving the indication of what to her means that our integration is taking shape or we're having some success. And like you've said, now let me give you an example of when I'm building my arguments whether the African integration has succeeded or not. Take Ghana, for instance, which is known to be a beacon of African integration and others. We had 2023 Ghana Investment Promotion Act, which act, there are two provisions that I have argued in the article strongly against those provisions, especially section 27 and 28, where Ghana discriminates about those who invest in the country and set certain thresholds of how much you need to come to the country to invest, even amongst its own neighbors. And Ghana and Nigeria has been having confrontations over the years, sometimes brutal confrontations about who to invest and where to invest in the Ghanaian sector. For instance, if you say that a non-national cannot invest in Ghana in taxi business or in production of same cars or water business or certain categories of businesses, and I argue strongly against that. That as long as the protocol of 1998 allows for Africans to come, free movement of people, if I move freely to settle in your country, I must live, I must survive, right? So as a Nigerian, I come to Ghana by way of movement of people, and I do not have the right to engage in economic activity, even as a student, where I can do some businesses to survive. Then what is the essence of that protocol? Now, so that is my understanding of what I say to what you have said. That we will delve into it pretty soon. So can I get one or two, then we move on?
Okay, yes. Thank you very much. I think for 1 and 2 could be combined in one way, because I'd say the challenge we have is the fear of implementation. We come up with good instruments, good treaties, but we do not implement, hence ending up with unfinished business. So we touch one thing, for whatever reason we are suspicious of each other, or we fear what we don't know, but we are not able to implement. So we'll keep coming up with instrument after instrument after instrument to try and address the issue, but not really addressing it. And then secondly, I think we also need to figure out how can we use the resources on the continent as a continent for the benefit of the continent. Because I think, I don't know whether we are stuck to our colonial masters, who we still allow to come and get our resources in the name of we do not have the technical capacity to perhaps extract and value add or whatever it is. But I think we need to get around to a table and agree, these are African resources, can we use them for the benefit of the continent, even as we learn how to implement whatever it is we come up with. Thank you.
Thank you. Shall I take this other one?
as we go to him, my submission in respect of the first, second, and third question is as follows. I would like to borrow the English saying, I'm here, that too many cooks spoil the broth. Now, when we have multiple regional economic communities, then that means we are having a fragmentation in respect of the legislative framework. And the fragmentation in one way or another hinders the implementation because it is not achievable, attainable in a way or another because there is a cross-section, there is a cross-cutting. In one way you want to be here, you want to be here, you want to be there. Now, that in one way does not signal success. It signals failure. And ultimately, that takes us to a third question, and my answer would be no. Yes, we are going the wrong way. Because while we intend to bring together and come together as one block, the multiplicity of these entities as RECs takes away that tendency and that possibility. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think we'll take the final, this.
All right, thank you. I just want to make one or two observations from what has been said already. I want to speak from my experience. I visited Ghana under the Africa Peer Review Mechanism, and the project was to assess the implementation, as my sister is saying there, of AfCFTA under the guided trade in it. So what we did was to move around the country, engage the stakeholders, from the government, private sector, your medium to small enterprises, and the ordinary men on the street. Now, what emerged, just to try and answer those three questions, and also add to what has been said, and also probe additional interrogation. There is, number one, the political question. We visited a manufacturing towel company in Takoradi. That is the only company in 2024 that was trading under the Guided Trade Initiative, the GTI. And when we spoke to the CEO of the company, he said, I've already prepared my paperwork. We are ready to export under AfCFTA. But our greatest challenge is you're not getting any cooperation from Côte d'Ivoire. When you look at BRICS coming up, there are two things there. The economic ideology that BRICS is running. There's also the political and security question that BRICS is raising. And all this feeds into whether we are going in the right direction as far as African integration is concerned. I'll stop there for now.
Thank you. Thank you very much to all of you. I'll leave the questions, and later we can engage in it at our own leisure times. Now, to judge these questions and to be able to answer these questions somehow is to look at what Africa itself has set as its own metrics and roadmap. So I had to also go and pick some of the slides that I have in the second lecture and then post it after this one, because like I said, these questions, I just developed them just to guide this session. Now, I'm sure you're familiar with the... Now, when the Abuja Treaty was made, it sets its own metrics and roadmaps. Again, shall we look at these roadmaps and see the timelines that the treaty set for each of the phases, the 6 phases. If you look at this, it can also inform how you are going to judge whether we are succeeding or not. So just look at the phases and then the metrics that were set and the roadmaps and the timelines. Now let me state it by way of that AfCFTA, or a free trade area, is the basis, or is at the base, or the first stage of every integration. If you look at the bilateral linear integration, which I'm going to take you through. So look at these and see the timelines that we set for ourselves. Whether our integration, and for this on this case, we're talking about the economic integration. For political integration, we have the African Union, so we've all come together. Almost every African is an independent country, and we've all come together. Now, so we are the economic integration upon which this roadmap was drafted. So let's look at it. If by this we can make a judgment of whether we are succeeding in our integration efforts or otherwise. By 1999, we were envisaging that we were going to strengthen the existing regs and establish new regs in regions where they do not exist. We're talking about regs. And at the same time, we're envisaging that we're going to establish more regs, regional economic communities. That was our focus by 99. And so look at the last of the regs, the last that Judge Yusuf talked about, the one that was established by the political one that was by Gaddafi. And we want to establish more. Let's look at the second phase, or the second target. Ensure consolidation within each reg through gradual removal of tariffs and non-tariff barriers and harmonization between the regs. That was, the target was 2007. Sorry. 2007. So ask the question from your own steady research and practice. Did we achieve this? That's the second foot. The second metric or phase or stage was establishment of FTAs and custom unions in each reg by 2017. Apart from ECOWAS, SADC, and EAC, which has the customs union, the rest, or how even strong are these customs unions? And in practicality, that was, the target year was 2017. Stage 4, to coordinate and harmonize tariff and non-tariff systems among the regs with a view of creating a continental customs union. And that was to be achieved in 2019. The fifth stage was the creation of African Customs Union by 2023. Africa-wide Customs Union by 2023. We are in 2026. This was said by the experts and the practitioners and the ministers and the heads of government, right? This was the target. And the last stage, establishment of the African Economic Community, including an African Monetary Union and a Pan-African Parliament by 2028. We have 2 years to that target. There are 3 elements there. The establishment of the African Economic Community, the African Monetary Union, and the Pan-African Parliament, which we have. So if you look at these 3 metrics and roadmaps, what does it tell you about the integration, the economic integration, and the way forward? Does it somehow answers or agrees with Judge Yusuf's emphatic statements that our integration is going nowhere? It's not a rhetorical question. It's a question that does it agree with what the emphatic statement that I did not know, I didn't have the script of Judge Yusuf, the eminent judge, but I saw his initial statements were just falling in place with my long-standing philosophical and theoretical perspective. That's why I quickly put this in together to guide our discussion. So from this, you will see that we have a long way to go. We have missed almost every target that we set in that framework. We have missed almost everything. So that takes me into the discussion of, and as academic, legal academic, I play with theories, because practice without theory is like a movement without direction. and perhaps vice versa. So if we say we're integrating and building for an economic integration, that would withstand the test of time. And we have examples of the EU and others to follow. And that is why we do academic work, research, and other things. And so in this work, I try to dissect some theories on economic integration, posit with what Africa has, and to make a conclusion or have a thesis of whether Africa's integration is hinged or built on a strong foundation, strong theory that could actually give us a direction, or it is just by way of a political discussion and a political arrangement to have a kind of arrangement that will make us feel we are integrating economically. And could that be the reason why we are failing or we are succeeding? And I make emphatic statements after my analysis and my discussion. And so we cannot avoid arrangements that involves states or countries coming together. That has been with us since time immemorial, whether in international law, international trade, and even international relations. Interstate arrangements is strikes. Now, and this is also often governed by regionalism in international law. And that regionalism is what regulates our international relations with each other. Now, there is a lot of debates in contemporary literature, in contemporary studies, as whether the integration in Africa, like the judge has stated, whether it has been successful or otherwise. But what we are lacking to do is to actually interrogate the works done so far, on the continent to see the implications of all these integration theories or the integration that we seem to do on the African Union's agenda, and for that matter, on the corridors of the African Continental Free Trade Area. Now, why is this necessary? In the Economic Commission's own work and its own standards, this is what they have stated: a continuous appraisal of Africa's integration performance is essential. This is the quote. To gain deeper understanding of the strengths and weaknesses of the integration effort and to help shape the future through less. So, in order to appreciate how far the integration of the REX and how far it has come, we need to do continuous appraisal and to assess the strengths and the weakness of African integration. So we cannot just, by timeline meetings of heads of states and experts, be calling ourselves for a meeting and sessions just to tell what we've done or what we've done. We have to do proper appraisal, academic appraisal, to understand where we've come from and where we are going. And that is something that the African Union itself and its commission had envisaged to be done. So what I tend to do, or what I've done in this presentation, is to put together the nuances of integration and development and to see on which pillars is African integration actually built. Is it just mere integration or just mere by copying and pasting? And the eminent judge made reference to that. We have numerous protocols and numerous agreements, and we are not lazy at all in doing that and signing that. But how is it pinned? On which basis is African discussing its integration? For me, Dr. said, I'm not apologetic about my discussion of integration because I know practically that is where we've fallen short and we are having a lot of challenges. And I've made this presentation at Harvard, I've made this presentation in Ghana, I've made a presentation at various South Africa, the same presentation, and I've made this argument. So when we evaluate these theories properly, then we would therefore appreciate the critical, practical African regionalism, whether we are doing practical regionalism or we are just following some theories. And there was a question about political will, and somebody said that we have the political will. But I said that we have to even conceptual political will. Political will is not just by accepting the acceptance of our heads of state to sit and accept invitations to sit for discussions. Political will moves beyond the fact that we agree that we should have integration or we should have a kind of a protocol, that is easy to do. Political will goes beyond that. And where I would agree and define political will, actually conceptualize it, is where we are ready to see sovereignty and allow the tenets and the protocols to work as they will have to work. It's not just by accepting and writing them and adopting them. So what are the arguments that I make? And I make strong arguments based on this framework, that market-oriented theory of development is unfavorable to Africa's peculiar needs. And from my presentation, I appreciate that our integration, economic integration, has just been based on market-oriented theory, which to me does not sit well in African philosophical, African kind of development. We either accept it or we move on the way we want. So I argue that African integration cannot function effectively on just economic level without exploring the liberal intergovernmental integration approach where development comes in. When I was coming from the Kilimanjaro airport driving here, or we were driving here, I made a lot of observations, and I was with one of my colleagues from Ghana. It's a pity, and we would underscore why we're having this problem. Now, so regional economic communities are part of that. Over the 3 decades now, we have seen the increase of REX agreement all over. Like, I agree with you. As for the agreement we are signing, not just in Africa, in Europe, in North America, Latin America, everywhere. In fact, Africa even has a list of regional agreements, the REX. And these proliferations are based on economic blocks and not on the phenomenon peculiar to Africa. And the judge was very right on that. We are not forming the REX based on peculiar phenomenon or problems, but it's because at the will of every country you can join or get out, depending upon where or who or which country you want to have a kind of relationship with. And the motivation here is attributed to a lot of factors. Again, we still know that the remnant of colonialism is still hanging around. Am I right or wrong? That is one of the things. So sometimes even the option to join one REC or the other depends upon the country's alliance or affiliation with its colonial masters. So we are still being hung by the shackles of colonialism. That's one thing I identify. Economic marginalization and infrastructure deficit, which is obvious, that addresses common political, social, cultural, and economic problems. And these reasons give rise to the numbers or the RECs that we're having in Africa. But we cannot also discount the fact that regional integration is a key strategy for addressing some profound African challenges, i.e. economic challenges. And that has been, some scholars have also attested to that. Now, if you look at the history of RECs in Africa, you can trace that to, and Prof was right, you see, sometimes we even forget where we've come from. Africa was one of the continents that had the first regional economic community in 1919. In recent literature, you will not find that. But EC was actually, the first time EC was formed was 1919. And in this city, Arusha. So I have the whole table which I'll present on when and how these economic communities were formed. So it has been part of our development, agenda or trajectory, and it's influenced by many factors. Like we had the history or the background, the Pan-Africanism development that started in Manchester. That is where we've come from, as the eminent judge stated. So this REX, as we've seen, has become the basis of what we have now, and like my previous scholars or presenters have made, the basis of the AfCFTA that we, according to Article 5 of the AfCFTA agreement. Now, so what is integration? The OAU at its formation was to promote cooperation. That was it. Cooperation for what? Cooperation for political independence. So Ghana goes to support Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe lends hands to Mozambique, South Africa lent arms to Uganda. It was just for cooperation. It was not for integration. To cooperate, to have independence from the colonial masters. That was the OAU's initial objective. Now, then came the stage of political achievements, or the fight for political liberation from colonialism. Now, we see that in recent times, integration is moved from just political. And now we combine concurrently integration from political stage and then economic stage. Now, if you go to South Africa, the dominant opposition, the EFF, right? Economic, what is the name? EFF is what? Economic Freedom Fighters, EFF, yes. We hear the leader has been sentenced, and we stand in solidarity with him, right? Yeah, I stand in solidarity with him. I agree with me. But we also have to note that we talk about integration properly. We should know that integration also strives at different levels, depending upon which or where each member state want to join. That is what our discussion is going to center on. So then I go to the basic theories that would make you understand that whether Africa, our integration, economic integration, is on a successful path or not. Now, there's this scholar that those of you who have done economic theories and developments would not miss his work, the foundational theories of integration, economic integration, Barasa, who has established levels of integration. And to say that you've integrated and can say that we have succeeded, then these levels, at least you might have gone through and have reached the pinnacle of it. Then you can say, I have achieved integration properly, at least using the base of the EU and other integration. The first, and this one is actually basically focused on market integration. The first level, and please note this caveat. And I'll do that because African integration, there is no doubt it's about market integration. And I've established that in the prior slide, and I will lead you on to that. Because of that, if we actually doing the market integration, which we are doing, because we are talking about a free trade area, then basically these three levels we must go through. The first stage is the free trade area. The second one is where you go to customs union. The third one is common markets. And the last of integration is where you go toward the economic union, where we have the now. Then you say, I have achieved integration and proper integration. So to say that African integration is not going anywhere, there's no debate about it. Because why? On the Barasa's linear integration, we are still at the first level, the free trade area, if we are discussing the African continental free trade area. That is the level we are now. We are not at the customs union because the timelines, the roadmap that we shared, was that we were supposed to achieve the African continental customs union at a certain stage. We have not. So it means that currently, as we speak, our economic integration based on the market theory or market integration, we are still at the basic. We are still at the foundation of integration. Forget about the various individual regs that have got, some of them are getting the customs union. For the after, we are still at the first stage of integration. We have not gone anywhere. Do we need to speed up? Do we need some incentives? And when we come, I have asked this question in the paper I'm doing. After 2021, how far? The implementation began in 2021 due to COVID, and this is about 5 years now. When we talk about the trading that is going on, the few countries that are doing trading amongst ourselves, I'll give the statistics before I leave. You will see that even within the 5 years, the speed at which it was expected to move, we are not going. But what are we doing? We are still drafting the protocols, right? Now, almost all the protocols have been done. Protocol in trade, digital trading, even youth and women have been drafted. We have finished all the protocols. But the first protocol on goods, right, trading goods, trading services, where have we gotten to? So like others have said, and the eminent judge have said, we are still interested in signing protocols and, putting the protocols down. But what about implementation? Now, even though this linear integration has received some critique, for example, Soma argues that even the free trade area is not the first stage. You must begin from the preferential trade area. But I'm not going to deal with that. Let's concentrate on the barrister's level of integration. Now, put integration side by side with economic development. Now, there has been also debate about economic development, which I've said that it's always philosophical, depending upon where or what somebody believes as development or otherwise. What is African definition of development? What are the metrics? What are the indications of development? By the templates, by the discussions, by all the draft of the protocol, did we define development in our own terms? Or we are still hooked to the market-oriented development, the Eurocentric conception of development for Africa? Again, I make the argument and the thesis that if perhaps Africa is able to develop its own theory and its own concepts of development, maybe an assessment of whether we've been successful or not may change. It may change. But again, if you look through all the regs, the agreements, the treaties that establish all the 8 regional economic communities, you find out that there is one common philosophy which runs through all the 8 is development. I've assessed all the treaties, and there's one common factor, ingredient in all of the regs treaties. They discuss the what constitutes development for Africa. Now, on economic development, there are various theories. We have the development theory, which emphasizes on social and political changes beyond economic policies to facilitate development. We have the structural theories, which talks about the modernization of agricultural practices with appropriate training and technology for all labor hands. So like I said, when I was coming from Kilimanjaro and we were coming here, at this side, it was beautiful, but a pity. You find very green farms, maize farms. I know maize is a common dish in Ghana, so when I see maize, or people call it corn. The farms almost everywhere in Tanzania. You see the herds of animals and livestock. Now, these folks who have these farms and who are herding these animals, are they poor or rich? Yes. Are they poor or rich? I'm sure some of you, when you saw them, we were pitying them. These guys are very poor. Are they poor or rich? By your understanding of development. Yes. Can anybody offer an answer or perspective to that? Are they poor? As we saw farms, beautiful farms. You see farmhouses. Are they poor or rich? Yes. Don't be hesitant. We are having a discussion. I'm a teacher. We are just making, and then perhaps we can develop some concept or some theories out of what we discuss here. Like I said, I'm a legal academic, so I like theories. Are they poor or rich? Can anybody? How many of you also use that? Are they poor or rich? They are poor. Please, can you say why they are poor? Can you say yes? Tell us why you think they are poor.
Well, I think that the
generality of it. Yeah.
Okay, so yes.
I hold a contrary view to that. Back home, even though I'm not from here, but I've interacted with young men like me who are owning more than 500 cows. And a single cow will cost around $400 to $800 if you convert the money from leons to. So just imagine, multiply that by 500 cows. You will see someone dressed locally, but they are, maybe among people in the community, they perceive them to be poor, but they are definitely rich. Yes. Even farmers, we do have them. You will see them locally dressed with flip-flop, short trousers, but they have large farms.
So back home as well, people have farms. I think within their community, just like what you are saying, they may be considered as rich to a certain extent. So let's just say one cow costs $500. But when the person going to process the meat, to sell them in supermarkets, the person doing the packaging and all of that, if you should find out how much they actually earn from the normal meat they've purchased, and then let's say dividing the meat into some they'll use for sausages, some they'll sell to homes, some they may use the bones for other processes in terms of food production, you find out that the middleman or the person who comes to just buy the fresh meat may end up earning more because they have used the, well, if we say raw materials, they have added value to it. And so if you do that comparison, they would be richer than the people that they buy them from at first hand.
The issue of being educated. Now you are even thinking about that. For them, no. They just want to rear these animals and sell. You see? So if we educate them, I believe some of them will benefit more as to what they are having currently.
Okay, I think there's one hand here, and I'll go here finally, then we'll continue.
There's another angle missing from the question, is that if you ask the Tanzanians, they will tell you that those people, actually most of them don't own the cattle. They are just hired to look after the cattle. Some rich people somewhere own that cattle. So I think that's a dimension of to add apart from very nice agreements of making. Thank you.
Okay, I think first of all, from both your arguments is first to distinguish between small scale and large scale farming. What is small scale and what is larger? Because the person you're saying, that's a large scale farmer, 500 cows, that's a lot. You need resources to manage those cows. It means you have access to finance. And that is the trading commodity that we have now, access to money. That person who has 2 cows cannot get a loan. So that's a poor man. If he sells those 2 cows, he'll use that money maybe to pay school fees for 1 term. And then the next year, what will he do? So that's a poor man. And then another angle is maybe the scalability, how they access now the markets, from what she said. You've seen small-scale farmers organize themselves in cooperatives, and then from cooperatives they get access to maybe loans, they get access to tools and all, and it's easier for them now to combine their wealth, and then maybe we'll start considering them as wealthy and not poor if they are together.
Okay, so let's the last bite from Judge Emily.
So I'm also not about the situation you're watching there, but I know when I see maize, I know. So in our situation back home, the indigenous Swazis, Maswati, are The commercial farmers that have the access to market, protections, rules of the game, they are organized and they're the guys that own the 500 head. So you never get to see the real money.
Okay, that's great. So, like I said, I have at least been in South Africa for quite a number of times, traveled from Pretoria to Cape Town, to the other regions in South Africa. I've been to UK quite a number of times, and you see farms. So when driving in UK, for instance, you see farms, like the same that you see here, and you see the farmers settled in those farms. For South Africa, so the same thing. See the same farmers have their own families set up in the same farms. But these are the people considered rich in US, in South Africa, in UK. Am I right or wrong? These farmers. You don't see them in high-rise buildings and flashy cars. They live in the farms, but they are rich. They are the rich people there. So by seeing this, having a state of this scenario that I saw coming here, in my mind, I said these people are rich. I needn't go to them and maybe individually assess their financial situations or whatever, but I saw them as a rich country and as rich farmers. That's how I saw them. The details of whether they are rich or not depends on how happy they are with their economic situations. Now, we can make these kinds of developments useful to the whole country or to the whole city where we have modernized agricultural practices, perhaps have some training in how to handle these people. Sometimes it's not because they don't have the resources, it's about management of the resources and even their finances and investments. So the point here is that our kind of integration, instead of focusing on development-oriented theory, we are more on the Eurocentric market-oriented theory. So when we come to Tanzania, Arusha, you want to measure development by the high-rise buildings, the cars that are driven around, and the kind of lifestyle, and perhaps the kinds of schools or education that they have. Do they actually make the people happy? Are they accessible to many of the people? That is where the questions are. So let me take you specifically to where the meat is when we want to talk about whether African integration vis-a-vis the rest and the AfCFTA are in line or not. Now, Ms. Lee has argued that because of the failure of market integration in Africa, and it is, that is where we have hinged our hopes and have tried all over these years. We are not going, and we don't see it. And he says that the option that is available to Africa, integration together with regional cooperation, as a more viable option. Why? Because the African-oriented integration is based on cooperation. How do you call it? Ubuntu, right? Is it Ubuntu or Ubuntu? Yes. That is the African-oriented kind of development that we have. It's not about each country developing its markets and suppressing others. Like I said, the genesis of our cooperation our development integration was cooperation, where each country is a neighbor of the other, is a friend of each other. And we drifted when we wanted to enter into economic integration, and we modeled our integration on the market-oriented integration, which are metrics that are Eurocentric metrics. Now, Lee says that regional cooperation, which is a collaborative effort between nations with common interests and purposes, is the way to go. Now, the market integration, which is the linear stages of integration, by Beres, have not supported our core values, like the eminent judge said. What are the values of African values? You cannot talk about development integration where you do not have values. No. We lost African values of development, the Ubuntu concepts, the social-oriented concept of development, and because the market-oriented development is selfish in itself and sponsored by these multinationals and their lobbies, this infiltrated the African long time. And Professor Machero, again, may he rest in peace, took us through the history, and when he gave us the AU, that now AU built sitting there, somebody made mention of China, right? Who said about China and its infiltration of our development? Somebody talk about China. Yes, if I'm sure all of you are aware about the role China played in putting up the AU headquarters in Addis Ababa. And when Professor Machero took us through the conceptualization, the architecture, and everything as it sit there, and that building sitting there now, where China is, you'll be surprised and amazed. Even as it sit down, China has occupation in that building. China has occupation in that building as we speak. So whilst our heads of state are down there negotiating and talking, China is there monitoring whatever and taking note of the discussion. That is a fact. China is in that building. Am I saying something wrong? Or? Yes. China has a whole thing on that headquarters there. So, ladies and gentlemen, development integration, like I said, fortunately, ironically, runs through all the 8 regs in Africa. Why? It is considered as a direct response antidote to integration. They know it is there. They have defined it there, what we should do. And this kind of integration relates to other development theories by integrating both economic and social development. It is there, written back in all the regs. But when it came to implementation and actual operationalization, you will see that our focus, and that is why we are grappling with AfCFTA and its nuances. Regional integration received conceptual explanation from different scholars and critics. That's true. Now, the second theory is M.B. Haliu, and he talked about the political theories of integration, which is a European concept of integration. What does this integration say? It is born on 2 concepts, the neo-functionalism theory. This theory explains how integration unfolds as a spillover from the individual sector and builds towards the integration of other sectors. Each one for himself, God for build the individual's men. The nation has no stake. Take the state away. Let individual businessmen build, and as part of their responsibility, they will take charge of the poor. That is purely capitalism, right? That is a neo-functionalism theory. Development for individual sectors. So build the sectors with the strong pillars, and then all other things will be taken care of. Then they talk about intergovernmentalism, and later, which was redefined by another theory, who says it focused over overarching control of the level and the speed of integration by the states. Now, I'll later argue that had worked as an intergovernmentalism project from the very start. It was designed as a rescue of the nation from the shambles of World War II. So what happened after World War II? Let's capacitate individuals who have the capacity so that they can build businesses, technology to take over development, and that has worked for them. Can it work for Africa? or we have to revisit our values as Africans. Why should Ghana, for instance, have a law? Fortunately, Ghana has amended not even amended, we have repeated the GIPC law, right? Now we have the Ghana Investment Promotion Authority law. Last month, it was passed by Parliament. I'm yet to review whether those two provisions, I know they have amended some of the considerations, but I don't know whether those provisions are still lying in the Ghanaian law. The foremost Ghanaian law on investments. It's not friendly at all. And we have not shied away from criticizing those provisions. So economic theory mostly constitutes economic objectives. That's all. According to this theory, integration is a market-driven. Is a conclusion. It shifts the focus and emphasizes the role of institutions and political forces. Market dictates how we will develop. And so, therefore, when we are assessing development, it is based on how individuals and communities and countries have developed. Take care of the poor, and not how the social values and the collective values of the people have. In Africa, this is a very primitive, it may seem primitive to somebody here. When you get food in the household, that is what Professor Marcelo taught us about socialism. What is socialism? Socialism was where in Africa you have your food and you invite all the household, right? And every hand is dipped in the food. You take part, this part take part, take part, take part, and then we are all. The mother and the father do not finish and then give the surplus to the neighbors. Everybody, that's what the concept of socialism, as Professor Marcelo. Somebody say this is a cake. Anyway, we will see whether it's a cake or not. So the economic theory is basically what we call capital fundamentalism as it drives other economies. This will be the last, and then we move to the next. The implications of economic theories for Africa. What are the implications? That having experimented this implementation, and to me, we have deviated driven theory, at least on the Barresa linear development stages, where we are still struggling with free trade area. We have not moved anywhere. What are the implications? Now, if you look at the treaty again, the Abuja Treaty, this is what it says. And I always want to judge us by our own words. Like they say, a man is judged better by his own words. How did we say we are going to judge our economic theory or integration? The AEC says that we're promoting economic, one, social and cultural development of African economies to increase self-reliance and promote on indigenous, underline, indigenous and self-sustained development. If these were the metrics, if you see the variables here, that were to judge our own integration, economic integration, then I respectfully want to put that I don't want to be so pessimistic, but I want to be cautious pessimist, to say we are failing. I don't want to say, I'm not so at the level of the eminent judge. He can say it and he goes scot-free. So he can say we are failing, but we are failed. But I am saying we are failing because I'm very young. Perhaps I will see more in my lifetime. So from these metrics, if I do the analysis of our integration and what we have achieved on the ground, practically, practical law, legal, we need to discussions away from the elites and so-called experts. Again, I'm unapologetic. Sometimes also sponsored by these same Europeans for workshops and seminars and the meetings that we attend at AU, sometimes even sponsored by these same people. Sometimes when we go for the what is our doctor? The organization, the JIMPA one. Prof, the organization. No, I've forgotten. The one you just mentioned. Yes. Sometimes you want to root out the facts, not the fact by the position of what is happening, and state how it is. Sometimes you have to be careful so that sometimes your paper may not be being published or rejected by the senior editors, and the Eurocentric editors. You may not have your papers published when you are too brutal with your facts and your findings, right? So sometimes even academics even have to succumb to the dictate of these theories and other things, so they can have their way of publications. But in real sense, if you want to measure our successes and to say that, are we really self-reliant? Are we actually promoting our development based on indigenous factors? We're really not doing that. The African integration seeks integration from a theoretical perspective. That African integration that does not only center on economic domain, but also on development. And if you conceptualize development from the African perspective, which runs through all the rest, you will see that we actually knew what we know or we knew, but we're failing to do what is right. So the review of the Abuja Treaty, the AfCFTA points to a shared vision to the extent that the AfCFTA becomes an essential mechanism. It's a vehicle, it's a conduit for actualizing the desired integration envisaged under the Abuja Treaty. So from Article 4.1 of the Abuja Treaty, you will see that AfCFTA is just a conduit. It's just a means to achieve these pivotal points that Article 4.1 brings out. So on that case, or on that basis, if at this stage of AfCFTA, if all the indications or some indications or most indications are not pointing, the practice is not pointing to this, and it's not showing any direct indicators in the treaty, then we have to look at it again, realign our objectives, and then see whether in the next session or next other years, when we meet again or anywhere, economic integration is actually succeeding. We can debunk the argument of some eminent persons like Professor, the judge, you see, to say that actually we are succeeding or we have not failed. We can only do that not merely by our self-interest, measurement of what we think that we've gotten or we have achieved or we're able to do. If at this time, 40, at the last count, only 4 countries have not ratified it. Benin, Sudan, only 4 or 5 countries have not. Somalia just ratified last year. So only 4. If all these countries have ratified, and if you are assessing the success so far, and few countries are trading under GTI, Ghana being the first, then it means that why are the others not succeeding? Or because perhaps the approach of implementation must be seen, look at it again. Are we looking at it from the pure market-oriented approach or the socio-cultural Afrocentric approach to trading amongst ourselves? The barriers, the tariffs and non-tariff barriers that the eminent scholars would take to. So I make the point that the establishment of the REX is just a conduit for the attainment of Africa's economic integration under the AfCFTA framework. So I will end here, and then I'll move to the next part of the discussion if anybody has a question or a contribution.
Yeah, I was about to simply ask us to think about the raison d'etre of the AfCFTA.
why did African Union members not simply revive the African Economic Community's rules and probably include these protocols within the within the African Economic Community's treaty, the Abuja? Why did they feel the need to conclude another framework to pursue the same objectives of the African Economic Communities? I'm just curious why it actually exists. Why did they do so?
Is that a question or just a comment? Okay. Okay, yes. Interrogation, yes. So you may speak to it or any other.
Yeah, thank you. My neighbor professor, I think Professor Ahmed in the morning spoke about political and emotional drivers that influence the so many overlapping treaties that Africa keep having. And so probably that explains why we don't review, and he mentioned that we don't go back to review the history and identify gaps, but we keep on coming up with one treaty and the other, and in the end, but I think, thank you so much. I think you about the drivers or the financiers that also drive the agendas behind these treaties. And I think that's a wake-up call to us as we have this discussion that as African countries, really, there is no way we can achieve our own interests if we rely heavily on being sponsored and being facilitated by all these powerful countries that have their own interests. When you talk about China overseeing literally, the AU headquarters and having financed it, that's I think it's a big issue that probably as African countries or as also legal practitioners, change can only happen when we appreciate that we need this for Africa and not for the interests that are being perpetuated. That's what I thought I could just say. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so on the assertion of the emotional and the what the other word? Political destiny. See, if you know the history of the AfCFTA, and how it's, and we seem to have, it was just an emotional, I want to say, political something. Africa, there was African Union Conference, and Professor Tamis of Ghana, the late president, got up and said, guys, we are late. Why are we not starting African integration based on the Abuja Treaty? Then a committee headed by Paul Kagame, was set up, and then a roadmap was, and then they met again. So now two agreements: the AfCFTA and then the Boston of Intra-African Trade, right? 2 agreements. Let's start. Emotional. Without perhaps, assessing, like I said, how we've come and how we want to go and how it's going to take us. It's political and emotional, and these are political figures, sometimes also based on their political promises, from their respective countries and how they want to be seen amongst their colleagues and then it's off after when. So the actual thinking, from my perspective, from all the studies I've done and then the discussions we've had and the consensus, sometimes we agree, sometimes we disagree, is that the right thinking of how to go and even where to start from, on the blocks, on the building blocks of the regs. Some of the regs are advanced beyond being a free trade area. So if actually we're using them as foundational blocks, some of them are the customs union stage. Why didn't you even build it from customs union stage? And we are starting from free trade area. And like you said, it is just last year when the AfCFTA was notified to WTO or something, right? So were we actually prepared? The fundamentals, the markets, the infrastructure, was it there? because these markets do not function in a vacuum. Not function in a vacuum. Like I say, the AfCFTA Secretariat sits in Ghana. You will find few business lawyers knowing that AfCFTA Secretariat sits in Ghana. Am I right? Aware. I've been a government member of the, and they don't know. And what even the AfCFTA does, it's all you hear about them when they have invited to a function or a program, and then they are talking. So we didn't actually have the basis. The basis is that from the scripts of the IC or the AEC treaty is there should be social and cultural orientation to the implementation of this treaty. There should be social part of it. That is African development I'm talking about. The cultural values. Why would Zambians mock for the smoke of Ghanaians? Why would Zambia, it was on social media, you heard the Zambian, is it Zambia or which country? The Fugu, yes. Why? Why and how? How are they not even aware that there's a country called Ghana that has Fugu, its apparel? Why? How? How is it possible? So we've lost the cultural values and then the social values that makes us Africans. Because you see, people want to be part of a system, their values must be integrated first. They must know they are part of it. If their values are not part of it, they can't integrate. So if, for example, when I was coming here, if I brought a number of Fugu to sell, to exhibit, and you will see that people are not even going to show interest because they don't even know what they will discuss, something else, right? If another apparel was brought from Zambia or Cameroon to be exhibited here, one of the things we used to do at Tilla, my course was that at orientation, you have to wear everything from your country. It's part of our training. You have to wear your native apparel. That is what so we are trained. I will recommend the International Trade Investment Law Program at Pretoria for those who are interested in doing a trade law or investment law in Africa and understand where you get all this understanding. To understand where we are coming from, our culture. If we don't do that, and we are focused about the pocket, the rich, like, the markets oriented, that is not development in totality. Because we may all have this in, the key thing is happiness and how we integrate with each other, understand each other. We can trade amongst ourselves. If we cannot trade amongst ourselves, the whole topic of AfCFTA, the theory, principles, you can read them. I mean, to me, you can read them. You can just Google and read them, can't you? So for such, I want to posit the real pragmatic means of discussing these topics to see how they may influence our domestic and international agreement treaties. As all we are here, we are lawyers, practitioners, judges, and so on. Even in judgments, by arbiters, sometimes I can make recommendations or some instructive notes to inform policy, especially at the level of the Supreme Court or something, where judgments mostly policy directed. When we are drafting domestic laws, we should not look at what the books have taught us, the easy way to go. When we are teaching as law lecturers or as academics or for development persons, we must look at the practical means by which we can integrate this continent properly. And whether it will happen in our lifetime or not, we can't say. But at least, for me, and if I'm alone, I think that we have to reorient what we know in the books or having accustomed to. Any other? Yes, yeah.
You've already answered my question before I even asked it. I was going to say, you mentioned that the drive should be towards development and that the idea of binding regional cooperation and regional integration could be one way that we would drive towards development. And I wanted to ask, when you look at the situation in SADC, you see a lot of regional cooperation and there is some level of integration, but we can't seem to get past our custom union towards the level of, say, common market. So I was going to ask whether should we just do away with the linear structure, or what else, what's the way forward from where we already have cooperation and regional integration? And I think when you say to look at integration at social and cultural level, it addresses that, because then communities that don't understand or each other's values will find it difficult to sort of integrate and now open up for movement of saying mix, don't have an understanding of each other. And that's when I think now we have situations of rising fears with issues of xenophobia that's happening in South Africa because of lack of social and communication.
Thank you. Thank you. You have. Thing is that the reason why we are talking and saying African integration is failing is because we decided to go the market-oriented way. And if you go to a market-oriented way, then there is this linear integration process that you have to go through. And we are getting the blockade because we are not able to settle the issues and the things that we need to, the boxes that we need to tick. But if you want to go the Afrocentric way of integration, I think and I know that we can even sell culture more than the other commodities that we are selling. If you want to sell African culture, trade amongst ourselves, in the art and culture, in the industry, in entertainment, and we can sell more and make more of integration. That can even integrate us more than even going Eurocentric kind of development where you need to get this and then this electricity here, that's here, this here, this here, this here. So if you want to go on our own way, we are not going to follow this linear thing and see that Africa needs to integrate, our market needs to integrate. If our market needs to integrate, then we need to do the things that will socially be acceptable to all of us, culturally acceptable to all the countries that are involved. Otherwise, if Ghana has its culture and importing certain culture and thinking Nigeria cannot align with us, and therefore you're not going to accept Nigerian music, Nigerian dress, or Nigerian food. And when we came here, some of us, amongst ourselves, we see some of us, the way we even react to certain, my brother from Ghana was telling me that, he never knew banana can be fried. When we go to Ethiopia, there was a kind of a dish. I said, I will eat it. I'll pick it. Yeah. And I pick it into my bowl, and I said, I will eat it. I tasted it, and I want to try it, right? So perhaps when we go to Ghana, and nobody will look at me, and I told them that one man's meat is another man's poison, right? And when you taste it, you see that even culturally, if today banana with some granules, do some small business, and people come and hey, there's a new dish, right? Now I'll name it Tanzanian, banana something. I have taken it. I'm going to develop a business out of it. Then you see, when you go to UK, you see Turkey, Jamaican food joint, Turkey food joint. They will name it according to where these things are coming from. So I've learned something. When I go, I'm going to start a small business. And then people say, hey, no, we didn't know banana can, and it's nice. Because we always eat it raw and ripe, right? Now somehow this is what we have to learn and how to do. We can integrate it culturally. And that would speed up. Then talking about the traditional buying and exporting and, this would be a lot. engage in import of and other things. The capital is not there. But we trade amongst ourselves on certain goods and services. It will be simpler and faster than we envisage. Let me take a lighter side of to respond to this question without sounding disrespectful to African leaders or without prejudice to their And Dr. Edwin Ikesi, who is also one of the directors at WTO, who taught us WTO law at Pretoria, he's a Ghanaian, and he will tell you that leaders going to programs have their own interests. And if you go, when you see the entourage that they go with, and when it comes to beauty, Dr. Edwin Ikesi was frank and said, look, when your leaders come from Africa, they don't come and take part in these negotiations. No, when they come, first of all, when they are coming, they don't come with experts like you, we are trained as trade experts, right? They come, the chief director himself or herself is somebody who is a technical, deep, what do you call it, how do you call them? A technical person at the ministry, trade or investment, and then he pays one person, a legal person, the rest are political apologies, right? And it's Ghana the same. I have served in governments at a top level government. So I was once a district chief executive, like we said, a governor before, and I understand some of these things. And they would also, when they get there, they sign. The next day, they give some, and they go. And the last day, they come back and append to the protocols and agreements that have been drafted by these Europeans. And what happens? On the other side, when they come, for every single provision, there's a technical person who comes to explain to them. Every single provision, they will come with hundreds of them. Each one of them is come to a specific provision. They are not masters of everything. As in Africa, one person is a master. Every negotiation he's there, everything, he's an expert. Expert in everything. Then they come. Meanwhile, in the after, if you look at it, they picked all the provisions are just taken from the WTO, lifted and put there. The principles and everything. So that is a problem that we have. So politically, some people have interest, just to get something. So on this note, I think that I was a bit, radical with my presentation. But I thank you. My time is up. As I've been signaled. So thank you. I think I'll come back, right? Yeah. Thank you so much.